it was a mystery. Hence the rise of indie labels, which was a great thing in them days. But you know, it was your fanzines, and I have very fond memories. A lot of friendships I made with English musicians, especially when I was living in Dublin, was always on the back of the little 7 inch, the little EP, or in the fanzines, was addresses.
Yeah,
So I started relationships with Marquis Smith before I even met him, just from
yeah.
writing postcards or that.
Well,
So I suppose that was our Instagram, was postcards and letters. You know what I mean?
same here. We just used to write all those little weird addresses, and some people write back, and some people wouldn't. And then you'd have to write back to everybody as well. Like, it took all day, didn't
I
it?
remember Bad Gadget was great at writing back, and so were the Cabs, Cabaret Voltaire. They were always, you know, and Marquis Smith was pretty good and always histrionic. He'd sort of take old Christmas cards, rip out one page, and write on the other side of the picture.
Probably because it's the only thing in his house that you can
Yeah,
find.
yeah.
So, okay, so the album and the themes that seem to be coming from the album, um, brilliantly heavy themes as well. There's nothing lightweight about this record at all, is it? It's a kind of record you can only make when you pass a certain age. I think when
I
all the
think
certainties have gone.
think so. Yeah, I mean there is a lot of people are picking up on me looking back, but there is a lot of stuff about today as well. Uh, um, you know, but as today is pretty fucking uncertain in every area, uh, people are tending to talk about reminiscing about early Virgin Prunes days and my friendship in Lipton Village and blah blah blah. Uh, but yeah, it's heavy, but it's not on other levels. I think coming to terms with loss, it's just a way of life, really, when we're our age. I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and shit happens. People pass. Obviously, your parents, but it does hit you harder when mates and people your age die. You know, my mate Hal Wilner, the American producer, he died in the first week of COVID in New York, and that hit me really hard. And you sort of, well, I sort of always write about what I feel and think. Uh, Maybe we're a bit more articulate when we're older. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah, and maybe the themes get heavier in a sense, aren't they? Because when you're younger, there isn't all well, there is, but not as much, is it? It's not as relentless, is it?
yeah, when you're younger, you're angry at the politic or the Catholic Church or don't tell me what to do. Anger. I want to be me. Don't tell me what to do. That anger is the fire and the fuel as an 18, 19, 20 year old. But as an older guy, you sort of you're over that. You actually get into your own. You know what you want to do. You know how you do it. I've never ran, even you know from the Virgin Prunes history, we never did things. We did things in a singular way. Even the way we released records, it wasn't like album tour. We broke that sort of. We didn't like the norm, and out of the naivety, the beautiful naivety of even New Form Beauty, Jeff Travis said it's time to make an album. And we says, no, we're making a 7 inch, a 10 inch, a 12 inch, an art exhibition, and a cassette. That's our first. And we're changing the world. But your world in your head, uh, and I have no regrets on that sort of innocence and that drive. It's quite I mean, both of us share that incredible love of the extraordinariness of post-punk. It was
Mm.
extraordinary, really was.
Which you were right in the epicenter of. And it's interesting you're talking like your attitude to what you do with the prunes things. And it was an art movement. And I do like to sort of postulate probably a fairly pretentious theory, but I think you did kind of change Ireland by walking down the street in Dublin with a dress on and making music to match, and I think and you're on that journey to this day.
Absolutely. And the mad thing is I I hijacked myself out to the hills of sort of County Dublin about 20 odd years ago, away from the city. But I've moved back to the city about 3 years now, and I'm right, like I'm 10 minutes from Grafton Street. And you sort of I was living, I wouldn't have been a cocoon, but I wasn't in the city. But when I start walking around these streets and I started going around the time we were re-releasing Virgin Prune stuff, I start seeing young boys and girls dressing like Virgin Prunes
Mhm.
and not getting their heads beaten in. So that's encouraging. That's nice. Yeah.
Two small victories there, and it? It's become more acceptable, and also it's become a norm. It's become a thing. I mean, there's a cultural knock on in there.
It really has. I mean, you wrote beautifully about Virgin Prunes in your book, uh, but a lot of the themes, uh, whether that be about gender fluidity or even about sort of like suppression and mental illnesses, uh, and then the way we dressed, we were banging on about that in 1980, 1981, 82. So I was going, whoa. And the interesting thing is, it wasn't really that arty. It was actually quite realistic, the stuff. It was heavy, heavy subjects, domestic abuse and stuff. That's not arty. That's just hardcore. You know what I mean? Uh, yeah, it makes those re-releases make me feel good. And there's certain tracks on this album where there's a track. I mean, I'll get them to send you the full download link. He should have sent you that anyway. Fuck him. I'll go from when we're off this. But
It's yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's the Church of Love. There's a tune on the album called The Church of Love, and it really is about acceptance of the young kids coming up, the gender fluidity that I really am. When I talk to some of my mates and like over the years, when the wokeness, uh, I don't mind wokeness, I hate cancel culture, but like I go, if these kids want to call themselves they, them, whatever, so we didn't want to be called X, Y, or Z when we were 17. We were putting our fingers up to everybody. Is that not part of youth culture? You tear off the past and you try to make your own now. So but the tune Church of Love, and it's sometimes a lot of the imagery I use has that religiousness as a touchstone, but they're not really religious songs. I don't like religion. I like spirituality. I like beliefs. And I really like the idea of something that's getting less and less, not just in, I mean, you know how suppressed Ireland was, how liberal it is. But in the last couple of years, tolerance is going. The live and let live philosophies, they're fucking going. There's people, because of economics, so much confusion between economics and politics, and the migrant issue is everywhere. The homeless issue is everywhere. The cost of living issue is everywhere. And it looks like we've a lot of madmen running the world. So
yeah, yeah,
it's probably the scariest time. Like I'm more angry. The way I used to get angry in the 80s at the Catholic Church and at Maggie Thatcher, I feel that anger now about what's going on in the world. And this far left, far right, everything's far. You always fucking need left and right. But let's bring it to the center and have the debate in the center, not just here where they're not even fucking talking. They're just killing each other with words and social media bollocks.
yeah. Nobody listens and everyone shouts. Is
No one's listening and no one's shouting, no one's talking.
mm,
And talking is sort of, as we all know, when we're older, talking is how you sort out your relationship with your partner. Is how you sort out your own fucking issues, whether that's through mindfulness or therapy or whatever. It's talking, and it's how you're going to sort out the Middle East and the Ukraine. and us Irish know that more than that, because who would have thought in 1996 the IRA and the British government would start talking? But it
Mm.
still is at peace. There's no The peace treaty's still there, even though Brexit tried to fuck it up. And it took 6, 7 years of talking to get Brexit over the line. Even though personally, I think Brexit is a load of bollocks. Uh,
Mm.
but it is sounds very simple, but the future is talking and tolerance.
Which is a recurring theme in all best pop culture, isn't it? Like provides a space for people to say things, but also to listen, and communities that go beyond boundaries. I think that to me
Yeah,
has always been the core of stuff that we've always been involved in, really, hasn't it?
absolutely. And I think when people say dark with my album, I don't think it's dark. There's a lot of fight songs where I'm giving the finger. I'm giving the finger, like Ecce Homo, the title track. Uh, Behold the Man. It's just me like going fundamentalism, far right, far left, global warming. What the fuck? We've got to fucking stand up here, or
Mm.
else we will burn and flood, and we will go back 100 years to the 1930s. Do you know what I mean?
Burn and flood, I mean, very biblical sounding words, and which actually makes me think I've always been fascinated by the spirituality thing you have. I mean, it's an unconventional spirituality, but surely all the best spirituality is unconventional because when it became conventional is when it, like music, is when they always kill it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, religions, organized religions, I'm not really a fan of at all. Spirituality and belief is like very simple, diehard shit. Like, no one should tell a woman what to do with her body. And if she wants to have an abortion or whatever, that is her business, you know. But that's like a time bomb at the moment if you had those conversations with people of certain religious beliefs. And it's like, I mean, you don't even talk about America. It's so crazy. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
so crazy.
yeah.
I don't know. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll
It's going to
know.
get crazier. Yeah.
Yeah, if we have an absolute raving lunatic as the most powerful man in the world, we'll know. We don't know
It's not
yet.
it's not looking good at the moment, but fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
There's something to me very Irish. I mean, I know it's very English people always say this, but Ireland does have a spirituality to it. Maybe because it's just greed and people believe in things, but I don't mean a Christian spirituality, but a deeper
Yeah,
spirituality. I'm just trying to work out what your spirituality is. I mean, famously, the other band in your village is, they have that spirituality thing. Was yours similar to that or different, or was it just a questing? Was it a quest to find what spirituality was, and a fascination with, say, Christianity that being misappropriated? Can you reappropriate it?
I
It's a
think
lot
you
of
can.
like little question marks. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I mean, I did get involved in Christian groups within the Virgin Prunes at the same time you two did. We went to these so-called, they weren't born again in the way the image of born again in America is that sort of put your hand against the screen type of crap. It was never that extreme, but we felt they were quite unorganized and fluid and open to everything. And it was like after a couple of months, there was a meeting, a prayer meeting, and prayer could be anything. It could be you just chant to yourself or whatever. And I remember one of the guys said, the Lord spoke to us today and said that Gavin and Googie have to change the band's name, stop wearing dresses and makeup, and you have to change your name to the Deuteronomy Prunes. God, what a great fucking name. What a great fucking name. But we're not doing it. And Googie, who's always as quick-tongued as anyone, just said, "Oh, that's interesting. because I've been praying to the Lord myself and talking to him, and he never told me I have to stop wearing a dress or to change the name of the band. So we're out of here. Good luck. Here. And we left the meeting, and I just was going, this is a lot of bollocks, because they were putting rules and regulations almost as much in a different way, the way the Catholic Church and most churches have rules and regulations. So I decided to keep it free form, in that it's my belief. And if I, you know, it's also more, because it's quite interesting the last 10 years with mindfulness and the awareness of you know health issues and mental issues and mental health. And for me, walking my dog on the beach without my phone is a form of mindfulness, but also a form of praying, because I love, and I'm not a fucking hippie, John, but I love just follow. I lived near the beach for years, but when I let go of all the shackles of phones and just be with the dogs, I saw the beach and smelt the beach differently.
Being in touch. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's actually being in the moment, and this all sounds so fucking right on in that sort of mindfulness thing. But you have to do something to shut the noise down as well. Do you know what I mean? Or we
Mm,
or,
mm,
or we will end up. I mean, anxiety, it's probably the biggest thing around at the moment, isn't it? The way we get
yeah, I
angry,
think so.
you
It's
know.
like it gets louder and louder. That's the
Yeah.
you can't.
And
Yeah,
you get frightened going, oh, I'm going over to London. Oh fuck. Will I be 8 hours to get on the
yeah.
fucking and 8 hours to get to the fucking hotel? You just don't know. And sometimes you go, yeah, it could take you 24 hours to get there because of delays and whatever. And the
Mm.
21st century. The 21st century it's a strange place. You sort of go, like these kids I was saying, I saw they were 19 or 20. I went, wow, like they were born pre 9/11. I'd love to sort of have real conversations with 20-year-olds and see what they're feeling and thinking, because we've had a good time, John. Do you know what I mean? We've had a good time in the last 40 years of this adventure through music and whatever. The world was a lot funkier and freer.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
They'll always find a way, though. The youth, as we know, always find a way.
yeah. I mean, Dublin's quite cool. There's some great bands in Dublin, and
Mm.
you
The
know,
lineage from the Virgin Prunes to Lankum is a straight line, isn't it?
it's crazy because what I love about that is the Virtue Prunes honed in on almost pagan Celt, the way that sort of Shanno singing and that almost ritualism when we were doing a gig. It was like a ritual, you know. We would like hold the audience, whether it's with fucking their heads up with tape loops for 15 minutes before me and Googie even came on. But it even got into with ecce Homo. I was looking back at that sort of pre-Christian thing and the sort of the ritualism. And I knew of Ogham, Ogham, which is the old Celtic alphabet.
I've seen
So
the stones in Cork. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm using it everywhere. Like I even got a tattoo the other day. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
and it's the
Yeah.
album title, but that's a contemporary vision of it away from the old Stones. So, but it's so I love fucking Lankum and Oxen, the other offshoot,
Oh,
and
amazing seeing them as well. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and, and they're young, and it's a Celtic tradition, but it's not diddly diddly eye. It's a long way to Tipperary. It's fucking hardcore. It's hardcore, you know. Uh, so I found that fascinating, and it's fucking huge here. like with young
Mm.
people. It's huge. And then you have sort of, the punk angst, post-punk angst of the murder capital, and Fontaines who are now going off everywhere, it looks like. Uh, and they're all Dublin lads, which is really exciting, for them.
I mean, think about Lankum and Oxford and what you've been doing for like decades. Is this like trying to find a 21st century Irishness? Like you say, it's not a fiddly diddly Irishness, but that genuine Irish, a spiritualized Irishness, something that's rooted in the soil.
I think deep down, possibly with me, yeah. But the contradiction that I am is I see the album being very European. Uh, it's the most electronic work I've ever done. Uh, I I didn't plan to work with David Ball. Dave Ball from Softcell, who worked with Virgin Prunes 40 odd years ago, just contacted me spontaneously, sent me a suicide backing track for a tribute to Vega's 70th. I did it spontaneously. And then over a couple of years, he was sending me dribs and drabs. And I go, well, this is interesting. I sort of jammed for a while on some of them and put it on the shelf. And then after about 2 years, the engineer said, you should listen to all of these. And I did. And I said, whoa, there's something here. So I went over to London for a week and worked with Dave Ball. And still there was no urgency, let's make an album. It was like, there's something really great here. And then came back a couple of months later, worked another week. And then I went, okay, this is an album. But I don't want it totally electro. I want to bring in cellos and violas and more that sort of widescreen Gavin Friday soundtracky, otherworldly thing. And I have that old school, when I listened to Bowie when I was a kid, and I listened to even when I'm very proud to say I love Kate Bush, it's just like the theatricality of that music. It's like you're listening to a movie. You're listening to a book. Do you get me? And I've always had that, and I always tried to make worlds. So I brought it back, the electronic stuff, and I loved the thing was when we were working on that tune, Ecce Homo, it's about first idea came around 2018 or whatever. Trump was in fucking power. And I just knew this was about, I call him in the tune, the Kill Kill King. And it's that sort of, let's get that template, that craft work, but then and let's fucking wire it up like a punch, you know. And
There's a bit of bit of Donna Summer in there as well, I think, but cranked up for 21st century as well. It definitely doesn't sound like a retro piece. It's very now of the moment.
it's very now, and I think adding the contemporary stuff in, but fucking, I put Donna Summer everywhere. I think I Feel Love is possibly the greatest song ever fucking recorded. No matter where you are, if that comes on, you just go, fuck. It just sounds, and isn't it the famous thing? Didn't Eno bring it in and play it to Visconti and Bowie and said, "Do you want to hear the sound of the future?"
Yeah,
There was a story when they were working on Low or whatever. Do you want to hear the sound of the future? I mean, I fucking love Brian Eno. He's this sort of Zelig that just comes out of the woodwork with this magicness all the time, and he still hasn't compromised himself at all. He's totally 75-year-old geezer, and he's still fucking poignant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
very switched on to culture, isn't he? And then also doing curveballs against culture, which I think you sometimes need to do something that's at a right angle as well, isn't it? I guess that's what
Yeah.
you've been doing a lot over the last few years as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's I think it's just in in my DNA. You know, you become like I'm a sort of a natural headbutter, even though I don't fight or hit anybody. It's just
Mm,
it's just, I don't know. You know, I get that sense of you too. Do you know what I mean?
mm.
We bumped into each other over the years, and it's like, no, I do it this way. I'm walking the John Robb road,
You have to do
and
things despite everything else sometimes, don't you?
we know how to smile and shake hands, but then we're doing it our way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. But also there's it's also a pop record as well, and it's one of the
It
things I always
is.
like what you're doing from the Prunes onwards. It's always been a sort of pop music. It's been a pop music, and sitting here now talking to you, I can see Mark Bolan looking over your shoulder, which is so apt. Yeah.
Well, don't they say? Well, I believe you know the music, the first music you bought, which is like really bought, like okay, you hear shit on the radio when you're small, but when you go out and purchase that 7-inch bit of vinyl, it really is like the first time you were kissed. And no matter how sloppy the first kiss was, you don't forget it, or the first girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, you don't forget them. And you really, that's why, you know, retro music is so popular because it's for everyone the same. So anyone that like first bought something in the 80s, the 90s, they'll hear that. And you even like the shit that you didn't like when it was out, you know, you sort of even go, you know, I do get a bit fuzzy when I hear I wasn't crazy on the sweet, but if I hear, I fucking love it. It makes me feel warm
Oh
and
yeah,
fuzzy. Yeah.
brilliant
So
singles. Yeah.
yeah. So melody and pop, I've no snobbery to it. Uh, the darker stuff on this album would be much more. There still is when you're talking about Celtic, and we jumped a bit. And I see it very European. There's two or three big songs that are like chanson songs, and they're steeped in Europe in my mind. Like people can bang on about punk and Bowie with me, but really, I think what transformed me as a performer or educated me the best was, even though I never saw him live, I just saw live videos, was Brel, Jacques Brel, because he had that the poetry, the anger, the essence. But when you see footage of him as a performer, it was like punk. It was sweating, it was spitting. It was not all precise and choreographed. It was very intense and very beautiful. And he would do polar opposites. He'd write about, you know, joining the army and getting syphilis. Then he'd write about an old person, you know, just the beauty of an old person, or then the beauty of giving children bonbons. You know, he would just jump. And I tend to jump like that. I mean, there's even when you hear the album properly, there's a tune. I was talking about my dogs earlier. There's a tune on the album called "The Best Boys in Dublin,"
Oh,
and
yeah, I saw the title. I was trying to work out what that was
yeah,
about. So it's about the dogs. Well, I can
that
understand that. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the dogs passed away when I was
Mm.
mixing the album. And I always brought the dogs with me into the studio when I was here, and they come with me everywhere when I can, and they sit under the table and whatever. And you know, I'd sing them this song, and Mick, the engineer and co-producer as well, he just said, "You should record that," and we recorded it. But when Ralph died, I says, "Okay, we're now bringing in string quartet, and we're going to fucking orchestrate this, and we're going to bring in a horn, and I make because." I was fucking heartbroken. He died the same day, same week Sinead died, uh,
It's a
which
lot.
is which
Yeah.
is hardcore. Yeah,
So
she, she
were the two things kind of entwined in the end with the song?
not Sinead. I sort of dedicated a tune to her, Stations of the Cross, uh,
Mhm.
which I think you can hear on streaming. Not because it's about her, but I had previously asked her to sing that with me. Uh, when Catholic came out, she rang me up and she says, "Why didn't you ask me to fucking sing Lord, I'm Coming? I want to do it." I says, "Because the last time I asked you, you fucking disappeared." And she says, "No, I won't disappear." We ended up
Yeah.
doing some gigs together. She came and performed with me on the Catholic tour. And I played her a demo a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, of Station of the Cross. And she says, "I'm in." And then sadly, her son passed. And I sort of knew she'd never survive that. I mean, she probably, amongst all the other things, died of a broken heart, really. But Stations of the Cross, it's almost like what Sinead did publicly in the early 90s with the Pope and all of that, and her outing um, the perversion of the Catholic Church and the crimes of the Catholic Church. She was crucified and whipped at the pillar and taught, they fucking they put her into the Station of the Cross. They uh, and then all the years later, she's proven she was fucking right.
Mm, mm.
But also, wasn't she honest more than anyone about mental illness and mental health and mental awareness? She was banging on about that fucking 20 years before it became a debate on every fucking chat show radio every morning. Uh, so, an interesting story I'll tell you. I mean, I fucking loved the girl. I loved her. And we got on so well. But we were quite similar in certain ways, in that not only we were both fucking baldies. Someone says, "Jesus, if you two ever had kids, it'd be frightening." But the thing is, uh, when the day she died, I was like, it was like a stake in your heart. But one of the most poignant things I experienced happened. All the national stations and all the indie stations, radio, start playing her. And people start ringing. We're all ringing each other. Sinead's just gone. And people were sitting at home playing her music for hours now. Hours, I'm talking. People were like taking a whiskey, having a wake, like an Irish wake. And I was getting a little upset. And I said, "I'm going for a walk with the dogs." All the fucking houses in the area were playing Sinead. And the pub was playing Sinead. And I was like, "Oh my God." And like a week later was her memorial. And it was as if the country lost its Diana, its big thing. And it was such a beautiful funeral. It was thousands of people crying for this
Mm.
woman that fought and knew and was so badly treated, especially by media. Media were fuckers to her. So yeah, I dedicated that to her, and we'll never see the likes of that. And it was of
Yeah,
its
I
time. It was of its time as well.
think she's very much an example of what we talked about earlier. The way organized religion basically there's nothing spiritual about it at all, is it? And you can see the example of that when she calls it out, and they tried to crush her, didn't they? And she was
That-
right, wasn't she?
Absolutely. I mean, we have, as every country has, big homelessness problem and housing issues, and which is enhanced even more so with migrants and refugees. I'm going, why the fuck aren't the Catholic Church opening up all the property they have? They have a lot of property everywhere, especially here. And why aren't they feeding the homeless and washing the feet of the refugees? Surely isn't that what Jesus Christ actually preached?
Mm,
You know?
mm,
So, and no one, they don't fucking blink. The government are getting it in the neck about everything. But I go, but you care about people. Why aren't you looking after them? I don't want this to turn into fuck the church, but there's a bit more going on. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's a veneer, and it's not all the church. It's just a veneer of it. And
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
was thinking that before we talk about the Lipton Village, I was thinking Jesus could have been in the Lipton Village. He even looked like one of the Lipton Village, and quite like that idea. It's a recalibration of spirituality to something that's it's contemporary but closer to the original notions of what this thing was all about, what you're doing
yeah,
there, and also what you're singing about on the new album as well. I think that lineage is there.
yeah. It's, you know, as I said, like I didn't sit down, I don't sit down with the notebook to write track 1 to 15 or whatever like that. They happen. They happen.
Mm.
You know, I was annoyed at the rise and rise of the right, the far right. It sort of burst out in ecce homo. My fucking dog died. Sinead was stuff was happening, you know.
Mm.
And I mean, there's a thing you totally get. I actually talk about there's a track, it's quite a dark tune, but it has a lot of glam in it, as you saw Mark Bolan, but it has that sort of it was this jam that Dave Ball had. I think it was provisionally entitled Alco Pops. And I fucking love this dirge. And it just reminded me of that darker side of Iggy and that mass production on the Idiot. That sort of feeling.
Mm.
It reminded me, the tune reminded me, the noise reminded me of that darker than dark sort of Berlin. And I said, why don't we add, and I always felt nightclubbing was a fucking homage to Gary Glitter anyway.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
it's got the beat on it. Yeah.
yeah. So we started dabbling around there and doing our own haze and going into that. And it just sounded like this motherfucker. And I remembered when I sort of first broke the law as a kid. And I mean break the law. It's like not put on earrings or eyeliner. But I remember going up to the Ballymun Flats, which was the high-rise buildings that were built near Cedarwood Road where we grew up. That ended up being the heroin pits in the 80s. But we felt the Ballymun Flats was like America had come to fucking Ireland. This was great. And they ended up being like absolutely the opposite to that in the 80s. But I remember you'd go up with your mates and you'd be going with your cassette recorder because to play stuff. I remember being approached by a lot of lads saying, "Here, do you want to see the buildings dance? Give us tenpence, and we'll show you. You can see the buildings dance." And I knew you had to give them the tenpence because we're going to get your head kicked in.
Yeah. At
So
least they asked politely.
you give him the tenpence, and he gave me a bottle, and on the bottle it said Lady Esquire. It was a shoe polish remover, right? And he said sniffer, and basically it was amyl nitrate. Do you know what I mean? And you're sniffing it, and the buildings did dance. They went woo woo,
Mm.
and I was going. This is the time I was into glam, and I went, wow, what a great. That's the break of the law. I mean, it's the initiation of when the young boy decides he wants to do this away from what his father wants or what the Catholic Church or the Christian Brothers. So it was like my initiation. So I turned it into this thing of like, there's a line in the song, and now I'm not my father's son. Now I can be anyone. Lady, lady, Lady Esquire. I also love playing with the imagery. When people read Lady Esquire, they go, oh, he's banging on about a Mr. Pussy again or something. Where you're playing with predictions or non-predictions or cliches or non-cliches. And it's basically about saying, I want out of this fucking kip. and I want to form a band. Really, I
Mm.
want to find myself. It'll make more sense when you hear the tune, you know what I mean? And there's that whole thing about, it's sort of, there's even a take me, break me, show me the secret signs. There's all that Kavanagh and mystical thing. And I love like mixing Kavanagh in with glam rock while sniffing shoe polish remover and telling your dad to fuck off.
That sounds like a good line for a
See-
song, that.
and seeing the buildings dance. Yeah, I can see the buildings dance. And after that, we did get our heads kicked in the end. You know what I mean?
But
Bam,
it
bam.
was worth it.
It was like bang. But suddenly I was writing about that initiation of planning to leave, to get out of the dull and boring gray of suburbia and do something else. Do you know?
I
And
mean, saying that, would you say you're as much a visual artist as an audio artist? I know you do a lot of visual stuff, of course, but do you see songs like that as well, very pictorially?
absolutely, it's yeah, I see them and I relate to them sonically. That sound is, how do we make the buildings dance? How do you make them? Even when I was working on, I think that helps a lot when I worked on score. Remember Jim Sheridan, when we were doing In the Name of the Father about the Guildford Four, he said, Gav, how would you make a bomb go off musically? And
Hmm.
he threw that, and I went, right, well, we'll start off with a bowron and a lambeg. And a bowron is the drum of Catholics, and the lambeg is the drum of Protestants. And let's beat the fuck out of each other with the drums, bowron versus lambeg. And we had all these accordions and fiddles, and the spiritual touchstone. I remember we put Voodoo Child to a riot scene because I heard that Jerry Conlon loved Jimi Hendrix. So I said, Jim, let's see Voodoo Child to a riot scene in Belfast. And then when we were doing In the Name of the Father, the main tune, the opening tune, let's put the fiddles and the accordions, real diddly eye instruments, through fuzz boxes like Hendrix. So you get and then I played it to him and he says, yeah, that's a bomb. That's a bomb.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's the visual really informs me so much. And I think a lot of musicians are like that. They think about sound and smells and atmospheres. I mean, when you write and you get an idea and you hear something, whether it's a bass line or a melody or a hook, you think of something, or or in your improvisation, something will come out, a word, a sound,
Yeah, literally sound and vision, isn't it?
It literally is. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, that plays out also in the video. It's an amazing video. The kind of AI tech video. It looks very futuristic. I guess some of the tech you use in that is ahead of the game, but also tells a story, and it actually integrates perfectly into the audio as well. And is that all the things you're trying to do with it?
Absolutely. And it took a long time, even though AI was quick,
Yeah.
because weirdly enough, you sort of go, as we were talking earlier, there's no fucking money anymore. There's no money anywhere. Uh, Even the big companies haven't got money. No one has money. So it was, I said, I want all that chaos that's in the imagery of the song. And he says, you're going to have to work with AI. And just that time, that week, that conversation was going on. I read a big article in the, I think the Financial Times, about AI and the fashion world, and the fashion world for designs are using it a lot. And one person said the whole thing is it's about the programming, how it's programmed. You don't give it to the fucking computer and it comes out like C chatbot, however the fuck that's called. You actually have to sit with it and work on, no, it's this image I'm talking about, and it's that image. And you've just crafted. And then I went, wow, it is all about human intelligence using this as an instrument. It's a bit like when we were kids, synthesizers, everyone said classical instruments are going to go obsolete, synthesizers are going to come in. It says, well, it didn't happen. It's about who's playing the synthesizer, who's composing the piece. I mean, look at Kraftwerk. They are almost, the classical writers of synthesizers. And Marauder, it's what they put in. So we found this AI guy called Petros in Athens. I couldn't even pronounce his second name, but it was Zooms, as we're doing, every day for 2 hours for about 2 weeks to get it right. So it was almost like painting with a computer, if that makes sense. And
Completely. The key is actually what you put in. Is you don't just press a button and suggest the mood. That's,
and also,
it's just another instrument basically, like the way Lee Scratch Perry would play a desk, you play a studio, you're playing A and
totally.
I to make the video. Yeah.
And I'm not worried about. Yeah, I mean, I'm naive. I don't know what's coming around the corner in the next 5 years. None of us fucking know, but it's fucking complicated. There's a lot going to come around the corner. But when you put 4 or 5 musicians in a room and they're working on something and you're playing off each other, the bass player goes off on one. And because you're in that mood or that spirit, you go with him. No computer can capture that spontaneity of 4 or 5 humans playing off an idea. That's called magic between a couple of musicians, no matter what it is, whether it's electronic, fucking jazz, or fucking punk rock or whatever. That's what makes us. And if you're in a mood, it'll reflect how you sing, how you write, or anything. So I see AI as a tool. I'm not afraid of Terminator at the moment. But,
it's
so this,
it's one vision of the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
So the
it,
compromise would be not you and the bass player in the room, but you and the AI in the room, as
yeah,
somehow you kind of put the human in the machine.
yeah. It's such a weird thing. Me and the AI in the room. There's a tune which I think you'll get because it's got this sort of neo goth punky early 80s thing. And I
Mhm.
wrote about my mum who passed away. It's called amaranthus. She used to have these plants in the garden. It was only when she died I actually Googled what they were fucking called, which is amaranthus. They're just these red, beautiful plants. They drop and they're like blood tears. So love lies bleeding. And I was like totally there. But my
Mm.
ma was the woman that made the clothes for the Virgin Prunes, was my mate. And when she got Alzheimer's, it got angry. But I remember when we finished the tune, I just started improvising Daisy, Daisy, Give Me Your Answer Do, which is, I sang it at her funeral. And everyone's good, that's fucking mad. Why are you putting that in amongst this tune? Then I Googled it. I'm sure that's 200 years old. I won't have to copyright control it, blah, 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 as you do. And then it goes, Daisy, Daisy, the first song ever performed by a synthesizer.
Oh,
Hence,
really? Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick used it in 2001 when they shut down the computer called HAL, and I
Yeah.
just lost my Hal Wilner. And they shutting it down. It goes, Daisy. And I said, now I know why I'm fucking using this. And it's that serendipity I'm making a more or less electronic record, and then I'm playing Daisy, and I mean, this sounds like a man in his own bubble, but so what? Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
isn't that the whole point?
Hmm. Hmm.
And also, another point being an artist is it to draw these kind of really random connections and make sense of them.
I love serendipity and I love planned accidents, we used to say. How did that happen? And it was a real, when you're a kid and you're in Holland and there's a language barrier and you have your two or three big lines, and it was always planned accident or I haven't a fucking clue what I'm doing, but I exactly know. So it's instinct and gut. And they're such beautiful things creatively. They're such beautiful things instinctively to fucking get through the shit of the world. If your gut tells you that guy you're at the bar is a fucking dick, you're usually right.
Yeah, yeah,
Usually you go, okay, I'll be nice, but I might slip off now because I've
yeah.
gut is telling me get away from him. Do you know what I mean? So I tend to be, for all the sort of finessing that goes on, I tend to be I'm still at heart a North Side Dublin bloke. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Working on instincts, gut feeling,
Yeah, an
and it's
antenna.
that's interesting the way you work with David Ball, isn't it? Because David is obviously, I mean, obviously brilliant, But he was sending you the tracks, but your instinct is basically sitting down at home. He sends you something, and it's not eyeball to eyeball, but you're
Mhm.
actually reacting to a piece of music he's given to you. So it's totally valid. It's just a different version of the same thing, isn't it?
Totally. And Dave Ball, if you look at him, like he's a big lad,
Mm.
and he comes out with these melodies, but he's a headbutter. He's a big lad, like, oh fucking what, Gavin? And you sort of come out with your notebook, and he goes, oh, what the fuck is this? And I says, it's my notes for the lyrics because I'm writing all the time. And he says, oh, you're like fuck, you're as bad as Mark. It's fuck lyrics, and there's only three fucking couplets and a fucking chorus. And yeah, but what are those three couplets and a chorus? Yeah,
Yeah, you got to get there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So would he bounce when you sent it back? Would he bounce off that and send it back? Would it be like a digital ping pong?
It was, but when we got to the bit where I wanted to sort of go widescreen on it sonically with sort of horns and clarinets and violas, he said, "Here, you finish it off. You go." And that wasn't close enough to just before lockdown. Do you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
he started getting busy anyway, again with the resurgence of soft cell. Do you know what I mean? They made another album, blah blah blah. Uh, but yeah, it was like he was happy. Next, he wanted to move on, but it was really organic. It wasn't this long period. I mean, I've got other stuff I was working on. I've been writing other things that are unfinished. I've been doing other projects. Like I did a big thing. You were saying experimentation. I haven't gone there as deeply as I did with the Virgin Prunes. I did in 2016 with a piece called the Casement Sonata, which was my answer to the centenary of the 1916 Rising. Uh, and Roger Casement, basically, you should Google him or read about him if you don't know about him. There's a brilliant book called Dream of the Celt, and he was a favorite of Queen Victoria and worked for the royal family, for the British government, but ended up going out to the Congo and seeing the abhorrence of slavery for the empire, and then went to Peru and actually started becoming, he laid down the train tracks for Amnesty International and then went back to his home country that was Ireland and saw the fucking way people were and became a complete revolutionary and joined the IRB, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and was a gun runner for the 1916. Sadly, was caught, arrested, and hung in 1916, August 1916. But I wrote this, but read the book, it'll fuck your head up. He was
Mm.
such a visionary, such an interesting man. Uh, and that was a very big, I put 9 months work into it. And everyone's going, why are you doing this? I says, this man is fuck, you've no idea. He's the unsung hero here. And I just did, and I ended up it being a 4 week sound installation in the Hugh Lane Gallery on the anniversary of his death, the 100th anniversary of his death. And I did it because I wanted to,
Mm.
and for no other reason.
This way it has to be, isn't it? If you have an
It
idea, it has to be finished.
has to be finished, yeah. There's a few ideas I haven't finished. There's something you may know of. I think he's a huge talent, and I think he's from Jersey. The poet Jeremy Reed. Did you ever hear of him?
I know the name, yeah. Yeah.
And he messes around with poetry and music with a band called Jeremy Reed and the Ginger Light. But I knew him from early days, Virgin Prunes, and when we hung out in UK a lot in London, Soho. But he contacted me when I did a lot of Shakespeare stuff with Gavin Bryars.
Mhm.
So I was really familiar with the sonnets, and he says, "I heard you're working on the sonnets with Gavin Bryars. I've written my versions of the sonnets, and they're fucking wild because they're like." It's basically Shakespeare in Soho, where it's almost like there's that ambiguousness about the sonnets. Like, did he have a young lover? Was it male or what? So it's almost like Shakespeare in today, and his lover is a rent boy.
Mhm.
But they're the sonnets. They're his reinventions of them, and I've recorded a load of those, and they are fucking heavy.
Mm.
But I'm waiting for when to release them. I hope to see Jeremy if I'm in England next week. So there is other stuff there, you know.
So in terms of everything else, to you, this is your pop record, then, isn't
Yeah, well, I don't know what the word pop means anymore, but yeah,
it? Well, I
you
think
know,
the way that David Bowie was pop. Or,
yes. I mean, when you say pop today, it's just the unmentionables come up, you know, the Taylor Swifts or whatever, the stuff that it just passes me by so quickly. I don't even care. You know
mm.
what I mean? But yeah, records like that, yeah. Uh,
Pop can have an artistry as well. It is possible. That's always a challenge, isn't it? I think.
Absolutely. It's a really hard challenge. The truth is the sound design and the sonic experimentation comes quite quickly and easily for me in certain ways. Do you know what I mean? Uh,
Mm.
but yeah, it's something I will be dabbling in, but I don't want to go out and make my version of Tilt yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not really there, you know.
So can you play this live? Is that a plan, or is it just releasing it and that's it?
No, that's a plan. I really want to play live. I've started to, but in the spring, March, April, I hope. We've got a few dates there. It's sort of organically, I really miss playing live, and it's organically. I think I'm in a very natural place when I'm performing. I really feed off it, and it makes me feel good. Somebody said to me, maybe it's your happiest place, uh, but I so want to play live. Uh, we've a few uh, DIY. Let's reinvent the fucking the wheel to do to see how we can get out and do it the way we want to do it. But as we opened our conversation with, isn't that the world we we started off in. You know what I mean? It was really tough to do anything in the late 70s. But where
Mm.
there's a will, there's got to be a way. So absolutely, but not for another couple of months. So I'm
Surely,
not.
surely, I imagine you do it like the 21st century version of Suicide. You know, somebody doing the laptop, you doing the vocals. That'd be hard to do it. I'd have thought.
Yeah, I, that's how you can do it. But I quite like the idea. One of the players on the album, Renaud Pion, he plays all the horns. There's an incredible dynamic with us between me and him live. And I sort of want to make the band as big as I can. So I'm pushing for that, and I'll see where I'll come out with, you know.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have 20 in the band. I wouldn't go into Talking Heads territory, 20 fucking but I wouldn't mind five or six. Do you know what I mean? I
Mm.
wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind. But let's see what the world lets us do.
Mm. That's all, or what you let the world do.
Yeah.
Who's dictating here?
Or maybe both. Maybe both. I have, and I love the idea of yin and yang, and it's something like I think I've automatically do is like, I mean, the Virgin Prunes, even though we're quite avant-garde, we did dabble with sort of melody and pop, and like we do Sandpaper Lullaby, which is like a little children's song. It's so, I mean, we're only learning how to fucking play our instruments, but when you listen back to it, it almost has that beauty of early velvet sort of Sunday morning type of thing. And we go, oh, and everyone, oh, we like that tune. I says, do you? Okay, we follow it up with the Beast. Bang. I'll come. So I tend to sort of like box in the head once you get something. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of
Yeah, the inbuilt self-destruction. That was very punk rock, wasn't
yeah, shooting oneself in foot. Uh,
it?
but my feet are well used to being shot. I could walk on fucking at in there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love showing look at this idea of like imagine playing these tunes with just piano and a clarinet and a bit of cello in a jazz club at 8 o'clock in Berlin. And then 6 hours later, you're in a fuck off East German, East Berlin club, and you're doing them in a totally different level, the
Mm.
same tune. I have that image in my head of, the polar opposites, but the same music brought into different worlds.
That's a
So,
pretty cool idea, actually, isn't it? Yeah, you could do 3 or 4 gigs on the same night in different environments with the songs reacting to those environments.
yeah, the only thing I worry about is am I able to do that at my age? Because you fucking hell, yeah.
Maybe take a
Where's
day off in between them.
yeah, where's my cocoa?